Dear students, welcome to EPG Patashala. I am Professor Abdul Sattar, Department of Philosophy, Sri Venkateshwara University, Tirupati. Today, we would like to discuss on the module Rabindranath Tagore under the paper Indian Religion and Philosophy. As you all know that contemporary Indian philosophy without the stalwart like Rabindranath Tagore cannot be taken into account. He is one of the foremost contemporary Indian philosophers who have tried to explain the Indian tradition with the help of Western idioms, and he has shown a kind of East-West synthesis in his philosophy. Today, we would like to discuss about Rabindranath Tagore in detail, and the learning objectives in this module are Rabindranath Tagore's a brief biographical introduction and a general philosophical standpoint, his views on creation, his views on the doctrine of Maya, his views on the degrees of reality, the nature of man, soul and body, nature of religion. And you know that Rabindranath Tagore was a Bengali polymath who reshaped Bengal literature and music as well as an Indian art. He is the author of Gitanjali and its profoundly sensitive, fresh and beautiful verse. He became the first non-European to win the Nobel Prize in the literature in 1913. He was highly influenced in introducing the best of Indian culture to the West and vice versa. He is generally regarded as the outstanding creative artist of the Indian subcontinent. And in India, philosophy is called darshan, which means vision of the real. Rabindranath Tagore take this meaning of the term philosophy rather literally. This is the reason why he thought there is a very great emphasis on personal realization. The great influence that Tagore's thought bears upon itself is of ancient Indian thought of the Upanishad and the Vedanta. He came under the influence of Vaishnavism and the teachers of Bhakti Marga. It can be said that his philosophy is a peculiar and yet a religious synthesis of abstract monism and a particular type of theism. According to Tagore, reality is one. He identifies this reality with personal God. This identification of impersonal reality with personal God gives interesting results. Tagore can rightly be called an idealist, a spiritualist. He can again be described both as a monist and a theist. It is safe to say at the very outset that the terms reality and God, according to Tagore, does not mean two different entities. There are descriptions in Tagore that create the impression that Tagore's absolute has been conceived almost in Shankara's manner. He asserts that everything is a manifestation of the absolute. Again, there are passages in Tagore's writings that clearly indicate that his position is fundamentally different from that of Shankara. In fact, in his lecture on Universal Man, Tagore examines Shankara's standpoint and distinguishes it from that of his own. Perhaps it is on account of this that Tagore rarely uses the word absolute for the absolute. The expression that have been most frequently used are the universal man, the supreme person, the supreme spirit, the infinite personality, etc. Such expressions naturally refer to a theistic God, and yet God has also been described as formless and featureless. He is called Satyam, Anandam and Shivam and Sundaram. He is conceived as the only one as the one only reality, as the basic postulate of everything. These descriptions are the descriptions of the Vedantic Brahman. A student of philosophy is invariably faced with a difficulty when he is trying to understand a thinker, apprehend a thinker who is also a poet. The procedure that is followed in philosophy is that of gathering evidences first and then making deductions from those evidences. A poet philosopher, Tagore, Rabindranath Tagore, does not show interest in arguments and logic. He is a visionary, and therefore he communicates the truth that are revealed to him directly through the poetic images of his realization. But it is the business of the student of philosophy to go beyond the poet's realization, deep into poet's realization, in order to pick up the truths of the poetic images and truth of Tagore's impressions. And there is a kind of danger in this kind of attempt. If we shut our door to all error, truth will shut out. With care, an insight has to be cultivated, an insight into poet's mind, poet's feelings, and poet's realizations. In order to understand the general philosophical outlook of Rabindranath Tagore, a student of philosophy is invariably faced with a difficulty in understanding a thinker who is also a poet. And the procedure that is followed in philosophy is that of gathering evidences first and then making deductions from out of those deductions, evidences out of those evidences. Here, the poet philosopher like Tagore does not interested in arguments and logic. He is a visionary, and therefore he communicates the truth that are revealed to him through his poetic images. And it is the business of the student of philosophy to go beyond his poetic images and to pick up the truths and come to evidences through his realization. And in this attempt, you will have a kind of, there is a possibility of an error. If we shut a door to all error, truth will shut out. With care, an insight is to be cultivated into the poet's mind. So, a care, you should cultivate the habit of going into the mind of poet's feelings, poet's aspirations, and poet's realization. And if you observe the outward life of Tagore, outward happenings of Tagore were not eventful, except the founding of the Shantiniketan and the award of the Nobel Prize. The outward life was more or less normal, but this was a powerful index lived within. This was an index, the powerful life lived within. With this few introductory remarks on the general characteristics of Tagore's philosophy, let us take into account his conception of creation. Tagore believes in the reality of creation, and so he has given a definite view on the nature of creation. God is the ultimate reality, and as such, he is the basis of the universe. In a sense, creation is the manifestation or the expression of the absolute. This expression is almost necessary in the sense that there is no sense in conceiving a creationless God, a God who just is but does not create. According to Tagore, God finds himself by creating. The reason for creation is joy. Using the Indian conception of Leela, Tagore says that creation is Leela of the Creator. He creates in the fullness of joy, just to find himself in the play of joy. Now, let us understand a few points here how we can take the creation as joy. There are two things, how creation and why creation in Tagore. How creation is through Maya. Why creation is, that's God's Leela. Here, God's Leela, it's God's sport. It is out of his own sport God creates this world. Out of his own, love towards creation, creation of different forms, God creates this world. It is on account of this that the act of creation does not give rise to any kind of duality. It is in the nature of joy to create another, only to absorb it finally in the consummation of that joy. Creation thus is a separate from the Creator and yet united with Him. It is separate because it has been created, but it is still united because both the Creator and the created are aspects of the joy of creation. Now, it can be said that there is a sense in which creation is necessary. It is necessary in spite of the fact that creation is a free act of the Creator, joy, for its fulfillment and play needs creation. Thus, according to Tagore, creation is a fact. Creation is a reality. It is an expression of the divine. And creation is the manifestation or the expression of the absolute or God. This can be explained with the help of an analogy Tagore has used. The singer has his inspiration. He divides himself into two. His inner self within, which is the other self as the hearer, and the audience, which is the extension of his other self, which is his own self within. Now let us discuss how God has created the world, taking into account concept of Maya. Tagore has introduced the concept of Maya also in his philosophy of God and the world. Although the concept has been taken from the Vedanta, it has been conceived in the light of Tagore's concept of the nature of creation. More or less, Maya in the Vedantic fashion has been conceived as the principle that brings about the appearance of creation. According to Tagore, Maya is ignorance on a universal scale. It is the principle of cosmic error. It is the mist and not the sun. According to Tagore, truth stands for unity, Maya stands for separateness. This Maya is not really a separate entity. It does not exist by itself, nor does it limits God's infinity. In this concept of Maya, Tagore has used a beautiful analogy of a savage somehow gets banknotes somewhere. He does not know the value of the banknotes. And so they are useless, completely useless for him. One who knows, one who considers banknotes in relation to the bank and considered the relation in separate importance, then it has its value. So also creation, if it is viewed as viewed in relation to the creator, it would be valuable. If the creation is viewed in separate from creator, then we would lose the value of the creator. And after the concept of Maya, let us take into account the degrees of reality. Tagore believes in it in a general way. The Supreme has been conceived as the unity of the manifold. The most frequently used analogy for this is that of music. Music comprehends diverse notes. It is an organized symphony, a unity of these distinct notes, and yet each note in itself cannot be called music. Likewise, God is everything, but everything is not God. God has many strings in his sitar. Some are made of iron and others of copper, and yet others are made of gold. The question of the degrees of reality would be relevant to the realm of creation only and not to the realm of Supreme. The Supreme is one, and therefore the question of something being less or more in it would not arise. It is in the realm of creation that something appears to be more akin to the reality proper and something as less similar to it. Thus, it is in this realm that we can talk of anything kind of gradations or something being more real than something else. Here, thus, Tagore's conception of gradation of reality talks about different degrees of reality, wherein he talks about a worm is superior to a clod, an animal is superior to the worm, and man is superior to all of them. And in this gradation, man is superior to all the remaining forms of creation, and also man in his superiority resembles the creator. On account of his superiority, man resembles the creator. And let us take into account Tagore's nature of man. Tagore conceives man in such a manner that without affecting the godness of God, he gives to man also a special dignity and uniqueness. Before man appeared on earth, evolution proceeded more or less in a mechanical manner. But with the advent of man, there appears significant changes in the nature of the evolutionary process. The responses of every other product of evolution are determined by the environmental factors and the physical forces. Their patterns of response and behavior can be rigidly determined and forestalled. But man is not a tool in the hand of the physical forces. It is with the appearance of man that his rigidity, this pattern of behavior changes. Somehow, man has the capacity to play a part in evolution. He has the power to change the pattern of his behavior and responses. His responses are not automatic. They cannot be predetermined. On account of the origin of man brings into light two important factors about the nature of man. First, man's nature belongs to the realm of biological and physical, which represents the animal in man, and also the second represents the spiritual in man. According to Tagore, this spiritual aspect of man is also known as surplus in man, the supreme in man. And because of this spiritual surplus in man, man feels his freedom, and with his freedom he builds his own empire and he rules it. Let us take into account the another aspect of Tagore, namely soul and body. Tagore never suggests that the body is an illusory or false aspect of man's life. On the other hand, it has been conceived as the temple of the divine. Tagore says that although body has a reality of its own, we must remember that it only represents the lower aspect of man's nature, which has to be transcended in order to attain the higher nature, that of the soul. Roughly speaking, in Tagore, body represents the finite aspect of man's nature. Soul represents the infinite aspect of nature. And we have to have a clear distinction between these two. And Tagore considered body and soul are the realities. They are considered as real. And also we have to have a clear distinction between these two. The soul is the temple of the divine, according to Tagore. It is called also Jivan Devata. Jivan Devata. Now, the distinction between the temple and the divine is to be understood in Tagore's analogy. We must not make a mistake of mistaking the temple to the divine. Unless you consider temple as a separate reality, separate entity, you cannot understand the divine. When you identify the temple and the divine, then you will have the problem. When you separate the divine and from the temple, then only you will be able to understand the absolute character of the divine. This is the beautiful analogy Tagore has given to us in order to understand the relation between body and soul. And let us take into account his concept of religion, in which Rabindranath Tagore initially was a Brahma Samaji. Later on, he developed a religion which combined some elements of Brahma Samaj with some elements of Orthodox Hinduism. Finally, he came to believe in what he called the religion of man. Whatever be the influences or determinants that shaped Tagore's views on religion, the fact remains that Tagore explicitly believes that religion cannot be confined to any group or sect or tribe or nation. Man picks up that a particular form of religion that suits him, but in the final analysis, a religion transcends all such particular forms. According to Tagore, ordinary religions are just aimless wanderings. The aim of true religion is the realization of one's kinship with everything. According to him, religion is a sort of homesickness, like a flock of homesick cranes flying night and day back to their mountain nests. The religious man is also on a sacred voyage to his eternal home. In the Gitanjali, the poet burst out in a religious fervor. No more sailing from the harbor to harbor with this my weather-beaten boat. Now I am eager to die into the deathless. That is why Tagore does not favor asceticism. Man has to realize his kinship with everything. He has to cultivate a universal feeling of love. How can this be possible if he runs away from the world? He says, deliverance is not for me in renunciation. I feel the embrace of freedom in a thousands of bonds of delight. No, I will never shut the doors of my senses. The delights of sight and hearing and touch will bear thy delight. In the Gardener, he is still more explicit when he says, no, my friends, I shall never be an ascetic. Whatever you may say, no friends, I shall never leave my hearth and home and retire into the forest. Solitude of its silence is not deepened by soft whispers. I shall never be an ascetic. Religion, thus, is not an escape, it is a life and existence. But Tagore insists that true religion must not be confused with what is called institutional religion. A particular religion may be a Hindu, a Christian. It is a matter of accident. In fact, the forms and ways in which these religions are practiced and misled the believers. Tagore says, it should be remembered that religions or churches or religious organizations are not the same. They are one another as the fire is to the ashes. When the religions have to make way for the religious organization, it is like the river being dominated by sand beds. The current stagnates and the aspect becomes desert-like. In order to understand the nature of religion, according to Tagore, we have to understand the book written by Tagore, namely Religion of Man, in which he says, the idea of humanity of God, the divinity of man is the main purpose of this book. And he has brought God to the status of man, and man is taken to the heights of God. Man is taken to the status of man as if man resembles God. That shows the uniqueness of man. In the concluding remarks, let us understand what we have understood in all this module. We have understood Tagore's brief biography and Tagore's general philosophical standpoint, Tagore's conception of doctrine of Maya, Tagore's conception of creation and the nature of man, nature of religion, and also his conception of soul and God. In this, we can what to call recapitulate what we have understood in this module, and we have understood in this module that Rabindranath Tagore, the outward life of Tagore was not so eventful, except the award of the Nobel Prize and founding of the Shantiniketan, and the outward life of Rabindranath Tagore was, though it was not so eventful, but it was an index to the powerful life lived within. And also, here his philosophy is also be described or known as concrete monism. It is monism because the reality is conceived by Tagore as one. It is concrete because that one reality is not an abstract principle, but it is the principle which comprehends the many, the multiplicity. That is the reason why it has been described as concrete monism. And it is also described as the synthesis of abstract monism and a kind of theism. And with regard to the concept of creation, it is understood that in like a Vedantin, Tagore also given an idea about a creation just like Shankara's view of creation. Though it was not exactly like Shankara, but he has given in a similar way, the world is real. Creation is real because creation is the creation of the Creator. Once the creation is viewed by the creator, then it would give some value or a reality to the creation. If it is viewed, the creation is viewed separately from the creator, we would give no value to this creation. And with regard to the doctrine of Maya, Tagore has used in the Vedantic way, Maya is also taken as the cosmic, in the cosmic error. It is ignorance on the cosmic level, in the universal level. And also, it has been taken as the power of the God. Then, with regard to the degrees of reality, Tagore has admitted the gradations of reality, in which he has talked about the superiority of man over all forms of creation, and also the uniqueness of man, which resembles the creator, something like that. And also how we must not make a mistake of mistaking the temple and the divine, or the soul and the body are separate. We must make a difference between these two. A distinction should be made between temple and the divine, soul and the body. That is the essence of Tagore's philosophy. For reminding the reference or inquiry, you can refer to e-text. Thank you very much.